Hi friends, and welcome to my weekly live stream about the Uno platform. My name is Jérôme, and I spend about an hour every week talking about the Uno platform and looking at the news and looking at new features. And this week is going to be interesting because be talking about the WebAssembly Jiterpreter, a new feature that's coming up in .NET 8, and see how it integrates with Uno. So. We've released one new article, which is about the Uno resizetizer, so the port of the Maui resizetizer, which allows to take your assets and get them cross-platform, so you don't have to resize manually and do other annoying things around asset management. So it goes with it works with images, icons, splash screens, and other features like this. So you take a look. It's been released as part of Uno 4.8, and so far it's been interesting to see people use it. So if you have if you were wondering about information about this, take a look and let us know what you think. This week I'm going to be talking about the feature that's called the Jiterpreter. And the Jiterpreter is actually something quite interesting. It's the .NET team that has been developing that feature for a while now, and one of the reasons why they have been developing that feature is because they were when you're running on WebAssembly, you basically have the only way you have two ways to run your code. You have one way using the AOT runtime. And actually, let's go take a look at the documentation for Uno. It's going to be easier to back. So if we take a look at the fundamentals, and we have documentation for tooling here, the WebAssembly Bootstrapper, and we have execution mode. So we have the interpreter mode, the first one, which is basically taking the IL and C# that you've been writing for your application, and all the NuGet packages that you have, and executing instructions one by one, but not as WebAssembly. It's just a way to interpret the IL that you've been writing in your application, and then executing it through an interpreter built, a WebAssembly interpreter built to run in your browser. So that's the idea. The problem, so the idea with that is that it runs fast. It builds fast, sorry, but it runs pretty slow, about 15 to 20 times slower than what an AOT version of it would do. But it's pretty nice during development, so you can build quickly and get your application running and test your application faster. Now the problem with this is that it's slow. So when you want to make something that runs fast, you want to go for the AOT mode, so ahead of time compilation, and that ahead of time compilation takes your C# and so the IL and the DLLs that you have, compiles them down to WebAssembly, and then that WebAssembly is packaged as part of the .NET.WASM file that is in your application, and then that runs significantly faster. Still not as fast as you could see on a desktop, because there's still some portions that are interpreted, and that's something that we're going to talk about with the Jiterpreter. But it's still a lot faster. The problem is that mode that takes a bit more time to build. So if you have a lot of code that can take if you're trying to build everything using AOT compilation, your application could build in 2 hours for something like that. So it's actually quite long. So there's a mode in between. So actually, there used to be a mode in between, which is called mixed interpreter in AOT mode, where you run your application and create a profile of that application. So let's say you go through all the code paths of your application, and then those code paths are going to be AOT'd selectively. So that means that even if you have a lot of code in your application that is not used or less used, those pieces are going to stay interpreted, but the rest is going to be the rest that was selected during your profile and recording will be AOT'd. So you can find the documentation to do the provide guided AOT here, where you can basically generate your profile and then use your profile for the next build so that it runs faster. I see Jose is here, and McNet. Hello, thank you for joining. So the Jiterpreter it's not documented yet because it's a feature that will be part of .NET 8. But we regularly take our Uno bootstrapper and we update it to the latest of .NET. So we're taking basically the main branch of .NET. So if we go to .NET/runtime, we are taking basically the main branch of the runtime, and then we're building an Uno compatible version of that runtime, and then we're packaging that up inside of the Uno bootstrapper. And the Jiterpreter is part of that new build. The Jiterpreter is kind of a mix between the three modes that I've discussed, which is interpreter on one end and full AOT on the other end, and then a mixed mode in between with profile guided AOT. The Jiterpreter takes into account the fact that WebAssembly is able to load very small portions of WebAssembly, which is quite interesting. So there's a notion of there's an API that's called instantiate WASM. If I remember correctly, there's instantiate streaming WASM, and that method here. So you have a streamed version, and you have a non-streamed version. So that returns a promise. And basically what you can give it is a WebAssembly file. And if it's the beginning of the app, and if it's the first module, so let's say you're loading your complete app, you can load whatever size you want. You can load a 100 megabyte WASM file if you wanted to. That's something that we used to have in a very early version of .NET. But afterwards, you can't load modules that are bigger than 4 kilobytes. And the problem with this is that you can't, let's say, put your app in smaller pieces. So let's say you build a large part of the application, load it up at the beginning, and then if you want to have modules and things like that, load it up afterwards. That is not something that works really well. And it's actually, so you can only build small portions of WebAssembly that you can load. That feature is actually quite interesting. What the .NET team did, and I'm trying to paraphrase here and try to interpret what I saw, it may be different. So if someone from the .NET team is looking at this, is looking at the stream, and particularly Caitlin Gatt from the .NET the runtime team, there may be inconsistencies into what I'm saying, but basically the idea is that for those small portions of WebAssembly that can be loaded, they're looking at the interpreted code from the .NET runtime and saying, if a particular method is executed more than once, let's say, I'm saying something like that, then it can be a candidate to be jitted to a small WebAssembly module that will be instantiated through that method. So if it's small enough, executed a number of times enough, let's say, and it has a set of other conditions, like it has a specific set of restrictions, like it can't code any kind of opcodes and things like that. The types of opcode that cannot be called, then it will be compiled to WebAssembly and execute faster. So let's take a look at what that means. It's kind of a high level way of looking at this. And they say, the runtime team, that it kind of improves the performance by 10 to 15% in some scenarios, 2 to 3 times in other scenarios. So that's something that we could probably take a look at. So what I did is I have a PR that updates Uno Bootstrapper to the latest version of that runtime here, and you can see that it's green. It's been building for the past 2 hours. It stopped building 2 hours ago. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the binaries that are part of that build, and it's a PR build, so bear with me. There may be issues, but let's take a look anyways. And I'm going to take the NuGet packages that are coming from that particular build, and we're going to put that in my local NuGet cache. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a custom version of the Uno playground that uses that version of the Bootstrapper, which can allow us to enable the Jiterpreter. So I'm going to change the Bootstrapper version here to the version 8. that comes from my pull request. And so we're going to be enabling the Jiterpreter. So to enable that feature, that's not documented yet in there, but let's go take a look at the sources from Uno. It's located in the target, the props file that comes from the bootstrapper. It's actually a targets file there. And if we search for Jiterpreter, we have WASM shell enable Jiterpreter. And we're going to add that to the properties at the top. Let's say true. And we have to also build in release, otherwise the Jiterpreter is not enabled. And let's go take a look at what that does. So there are quite a few other updates in .NET 8 with regards to performance, particularly the fact that by default now SIMD is enabled. And that's actually quite significant because in the runtime, actually, I'm sorry, in the BCL, the .NET team has made a lot of changes that add code paths to features like link and list manipulations and list class, dictionaries, and others, so that they can use SIMD enabled upcodes to go a lot faster. So that's actually quite interesting, and it's enabled by default by the single reason that Safari, the latest version of Safari and iOS, now supports SIMD, and that was the last browser to miss support for WebAssembly, for SIMD on WebAssembly. So there you go. So that's the application running. So it's actually running pretty well using the latest .NET 8. So that's pretty nice. And now let's go take a look at the sources. And now what we can see here, and if you have an acute eye, you will be seeing that there's a WebAssembly. Let me actually zoom in on this because it's a bit too small. There's a WebAssembly node that showed up, and that WebAssembly node contains a lot of small methods. So for now, I don't know why the name is that way, but if we click on one, we're going to be able to see which method are being compiled. So let's go take a look down at what that method was. So that one is put entry. I don't know what that is, but let's find another one. So we have up inequality, we have subtract. I don't know what that is. It looks like it's a subtract for 2 integers. So it looks like it's a long subtraction. Would that be? No, I don't know what that is. Subtract, but I don't know which one that is. So there's that one. There's get from theme. So that is a function that comes from Uno. Enter. So that I don't know, but it's actually quite large. So it's a pretty long method. What do we have here? Try register inherited properties. That one is actually pretty complex. And it's interesting to see that it has been compiled down to WebAssembly. So it's not particularly useful to see what that is inside, because you have, unnamed variables and other pieces like this. I don't know if that's going to be enabled, improved in the future or not, but that's pretty interesting. So, and you can see that there's quite a few of them already. I don't know if there's a number somewhere, but anyways, that it doesn't matter that much. But the idea is that those functions have been elected to be compiled down to WebAssembly, even though the application is still running using the interpreter. So that's very nice. So now I want to show you something, and that's actually quite interesting. If I take a look at, pay close attention to the list of numbers here, because it doesn't matter that much, but when I'm going to be clicking on snippets here, you're going to see that that list is going to be changing. Take a look. See, when I open the list, see, new functions have been compiled. See, that list changes now because the runtime is detecting that methods are eligible for being compiled down to WebAssembly. And you can see, for instance, that the invoke.js method, which is a method that probably executes JavaScript somehow, is something that you would benefit for performance improvement in going down to WebAssembly. So same thing here. Of course, hit test visibility is probably a feature that we're using to validate the visibility of some items that are part of the WebAssembly, of the not the WebAssembly, of the UI elements that are part of that that grid here for the calendar view. So that gives you an idea of what the interpreter, the Jiterpreter, is able to do. So just to stay a little bit on that name, JIT, the Jiterpreter is a combination of JIT and interpreter, and the reason it's called JIT is because in the, let's say, standard .NET world, a JIT basically takes, at runtime, it takes the IL that you have from your application and generates machine code out of it. So it can be, let's say, if you're on an x64 machine, it's going to be generating x64. And now the idea here is that the .NET team took the JIT that exists in the runtime currently, and instead of generating, x86 or whatever that's available, they're generating WebAssembly on the fly so that your application runs faster. So that's pretty nice, and I hope to see that. I hope that we'll be able to see some significant performance improvement in running application this way. There's actually two sides of that part with the Jiterpreter. It actually can generate code from actual IL that you're executing. So let's say take code that comes from an actual method that you wrote inside of your assemblies. But there's also what is called the transitions from WebAssembly, so the interpreter mode down to AOT. So there's some glue code that is generated, that is not necessarily generated, but when you're interpreting, when you're going from the interpreter down to AOT, there's some glue code that's in the interpreter currently, and that code is not super fast. And the Jiterpreter is able to do some optimization specifically for that code path. So what is going to be interesting is that even if you're using AOT or profile AOT, having the Jiterpreter enabled will likely provide some interesting performance improvements, which remain to be seen, to be fair, because I haven't tried that yet. All those bits are very new. They're just out the oven for the past 24 hours, but that's going to be interesting to see. So what happens to, Cal is asking, what happened to the stack trace of exception from such JITted methods? That I do not know, and that would be probably something that we can take a look at. I don't know if we can make it fail that way, to be honest. But it's likely that that method is going to show up with a very weird stack trace. So to be clear on the fact that AOT is currently not giving the best stack traces, because the stack walking of WebAssembly is not working, is not super efficient, and it's actually a security feature. It's certainly not going to be that much of a problem, or at least it's not going to be aggravating a problem that already exists, and something that will not have an impact in debug mode, because in debug mode the Jiterpreter is not enabled at all. So that's the interesting part about the Jiterpreter and exception handling. So that's it. So what I wanted to show you afterward, what was it? I don't recall. I don't remember if we had anything additional there. Oh yes, I want to show you something there. So there's something that the runtime is doing, of course, because it has to have statistics with regards to how the Jiterpreter is actually doing its own determination of what should be jitted or not. And there's interval.jiterpreter dump stats. And what you'll get from there is a set of statistics that are coming from what the Jiterpreter is doing. So let's say here, we can see that the Jiterpreter took 57 milliseconds generating methods. I don't know which one exactly. I don't know if, let's see if we have 300 chain traces, 315 candidates, so 98%. And I don't know what the rest is, to be honest. I know that there are some additional options that we can enable, and we can probably go take a look at that. So if we go search for options there. Oh, okay. So before we get to find out what the portions of the Jiterpreter are useful there. I was wondering what those aborts were, and those aborts mean that the Jiterpreter found out that the methods that were to be Jiterpreted contained specific opcodes that are not supported by the Jiterpreter or by WebAssembly. So I'm not sure exactly what all of this means, to be fair. I'm surprised by this one, to be honest. I would have thought that the Jiterpreter would have been able to call methods. It looks like it's not able to do so. So maybe there's something else that's not possible. So for instance, we're not able to call arbitrary methods because they don't exist as part of WebAssembly methods. Maybe because they only exist as part of interpreter method, and there's no way to come back to it. Maybe. But anyway, so that's the kind of, maybe generics. Yeah, why not? Maybe that's one of the features that may be not working there. So, for instance, creating a new object's not supported for some reason. So yeah, that's the kind of things that are quite interesting. And you can see some methods that are too big. If they're too big, so that means that the generated code would go over 4 kilobytes of WebAssembly, so that would fail when generating the method when we request for WebAssembly to actually load that small chunk of JIT code. So I'm going to go and just take a look in the runtime to know if there's an additional option that we can provide. I think there is, but I don't recall which one exactly. So let's go find out. Jiterpreter jump stats. Is it not finding it? Okay, so for some reason, oh, maybe it's been removed. That could be. Let's go see. We have stats enabled. We have options. So those are all the options. So let's go take a look at that file specifically. And there are quite a few options that are available as part of the Jiterpreter. So those are what the Jiterpreter is able to do. So there's some that are disabled. So we can see that exception handling is enabled. So one of the questions that you had, Kyle, was about exception handling. So that one is enabled here. We have backward branch entry. So I don't know what that is. Trace points. I don't know. We have Jiterpreter disable heuristics. We have print Jiterpreter statistics. Okay, so that would be an automatic dump of the Jiterpreter statistics that I have shown just a little bit before. We have counts of bailouts on cause. There's a way to dump the traces completely, so that's nice. So we can know what's inside methods. So if they're too small, they're ejected. JIT trace entry points once they are hit, so 10,000. I don't know what that is specifically. Okay, so maybe we can enable that one. So what I want to do, why I'm spending a little bit on time on this one, is because there's a new option that was introduced in the runtime that is called runtime options. And that's a new option that we can provide here. And I think we can do it that way. And it's not options, it's another name. So let's go take a look at the actual name. So we have a runtime options. Okay, so it's WASM shell runtime options. And if we add this here, we should be having that new option. So let's enable the other one as well. So the one that dumps the statistics every time. It's called Jiterpreter stats enabled. So let's go and enable that specific feature. And let's see if that works. I'm not sure if it will work because it was enabled pretty late in the development cycle, but let's see if it actually does. So we go back to the playground and then we do this. Let's go and update this. I'm going to be rebuilding the playground and get those two new options provided. And I'm going to show you where those options end up. That's actually quite interesting, which may end up being changed. I learned today that some of the bootstrapping is being reworked for .NET 8. So we may have to adjust some of it, but we'll see. So that's our playground. There you go. Okay, so let's see if the options that we passed in are actually working. So one of the features that I was talking about is the fact that we have those options that are passed in. They're supposed to be in a file that's named monoconfig, but I don't see it here. So we're going to have to get it from the network tab. And it's called monoconfig.json. And we can see here that we have a few options, but it looks like the options that I provided are not in the file, so it doesn't work. So that's one new bug to take a look at. For some reason, that is not taken into account. Could be because I didn't build it properly, or because there's a bug in the support for mapping those parameters, but it's going to be interesting to fix. Okay, so that's it. So that's the Jiterpreter. It's a very, very interesting feature. We expect at Uno that for our clients, it's going to bring some interesting performance improvements. Those builds that you just saw for the Bootstrapper are going to be available probably during the week, pending any fixes that we can find. So when that is available, take a look and let us know. So that's it for that feature. Now we're going to be taking a look at another feature. I thought I had it. There you go. Okay, so it's an issue that was open a while back, which is about relative source bindings that are not supported inside list view item template. So that is actually quite curious because this is something that has been supported for a while. So maybe there's something specific that we broke or that was not working properly originally. So we can probably try to find the root cause of this and see if it's a source generator issue or if it's a just plain binding issue. That could be either of those. So let's go take a look at that. So it's 925. Oh, too many numbers. Okay, let's take a look at this here. So there's no new update of Visual Studio today. And I wouldn't be surprised if we had a brand new 17.6 release next week because of Microsoft Build that's happening next week. So I hope you're going to be taking a look at this. And it's likely that I will not be streaming on that day because there's going to be a lot of interesting sessions to watch. So that will be for the week after the next streaming. And also my camera from last week has been jumping around, and this week it's looking fine. So looks like it was a transient issue, probably just because I rebooted. Okay, so we have a relative source binding, which is using the older template of Uno. Now let's go take a look at what this is doing. We have a main page and a list view. So let's take all of this And let's go to the playground. Let's see if it repros. So we have nothing here, and we can probably just go bind to the tips here. So tips is, so we're not binding anything because maybe there's nothing in it. Why would that happen? So we're binding to data context of tips. What's missing there? Not seeing anything. So let's see if I do. No, I have nothing there. Am I missing something here? So if it's not working like this, let's take a look and put a grid outside and see if we're actually showing something up. Or a stack panel for that matter. Let's go for a stack panel. So I'm going to put a stack panel here. And we're going to be just adding a text block. And see if we're actually binding to tips, which looks interesting. I have stack panel. What did I break? With the list view, stack panel. This view, this view. Okay, so it actually does say that it's a collection, so it's an item source. But for some reason, it's not binding my list. Okay, so I have my items here, but when I specify the data template in there, it doesn't work. Could it be because of the data context? No. The stack panel is supposed to be available. The binding is available. Am I breaking something up here? No. That's curious. That is very curious. Because the tips for the item source should be the right one. Let's go for an items control instead. Okay, still nothing. Okay, so for some reason, there's something here with the stack panel that's breaking my content. And I'm not too sure why that would happen. Okay, so it's the fact of naming the parent. So that is very curious. So it looks like there's a bug with there's a bug here with the parent, the naming of the parent that's at the top. Let's see if there's an exception at runtime. Doesn't look like it. Okay, so it's that's an interesting fact. If I remove, okay, so I have a binding here that's supposed to be working, and it's supposed to be doing templated parent. It's supposed to be binding to the templated parent. So we have the content that's available on that text block. There's a workaround that's supposed to be working here when the X name is provided on the stack panel, but that's not what we're looking for. So we should be having that templated parent working. The thing is that templated parent in that context is not necessarily something that may work because the templated parent may not be the one that you expect. And I wonder, so if we remove this here, we can see that the templated parent really is content. And if I do the update, we can see that content. So the relative source for the templated parent is list view. And we're trying to bind it to content, and there's no content on list view. So let's say if I were to put a tag here, If I set it to 42, and I set tag in there, would I get something? Yes, I do get something. Okay, so I'm not too sure what was the intent here. So we're going to take a look at what the application's doing when running on Windows, because there's something there. There are two things that are curious here. The fact that xname here was not working, so that is not supposed to happen. Let's go take a look at what the application does on UWP. That may be that we're not resolving the templated parent properly. This is something that that can happen. Sometimes the templated parent is the one from the item template, but it can also be the one that's coming from the list view. So it may be significantly different. Okay, so we can see here that it likely binds to the item template and not the list view. So if we do the same kind of modification, and instead of adding content, we just do relative source like this. We may get the actual parent. And you can see here that we're getting the list view item presenter and not the list view itself. So that's actually quite interesting. So that means that for some reason, the templated parent is being overridden in Uno to a value that's not the right one. And I wonder why that is. And it's something that the templated parent management has been something that is a little bit different from what WinUI has been doing. And the difference is related to how we are resolving the templated parent. So in WinUI, the templated parent is something that is done when the my camera just dropped. It took a while, but it's still dropping. Interesting. Let me turn that back on to see. So it's supposed to be a parse time feature. So the templated parent is resolved only when the XAML is read, and when this happens, and when you take one piece of XAML and you put it somewhere else, the templated parent is not going to be changing. And that's not what happens in Uno. So if you take one piece of XAML that has been loaded from XAML, that has been loaded from a XAML file, and you assign it to, you load it as normal content, and you take one piece of that that has a template parent and put it somewhere else, Uno will propagate what it thinks is the actual templated parent, which is incorrect. It's not supposed to be working that way. And it causes that kind of issues that we're seeing here. So this is incorrect, and we're going to try to make a unit test out of it to see if we can reproduce the behavior. Is my camera? My camera is a C922 something. And I think it's not the camera itself. I think it's one of my USB hubs that are in between that may be causing issues. It's probably drawing too much power or something, and then it jumps off. Could be something like that. Or maybe I'm due to get a new camera. Could be that as well. So let's go take a look at our new unit test. So we're talking about templated parent. List view. Oh, there's one thing that we wanted to try. So if I'm in a items control, will it do the same? Because if it's a list view issue, it's a different it's a different thing than looking at issues there. Okay, so I have relative source binding fail here. So I have my tag. Oh, you can see here that okay, so that's interesting. So if I change, so you can see that the tag binding, the tag relative source binding did actually fail. If I set content now, it still fails. So that means that the relative source is completely different in that context. And what is it? So let's remove that part. Oh, there's no relative source at all. Okay, so it's completely different. So that would be something that is that there. So we may have two issues. The first one would be that list view is actually not setting the templated parent properly. It's setting it to itself for the children, but it's not supposed to work. And then for items control, it's empty completely. So we're gonna have two tests to write. So Pinedax is saying Logitech 930 does not work well with a connected hub. So maybe that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna try to change that. Yeah, it's pretty close to the model that you have. Anyways, so that's it. So let's go back to Uno. We're gonna try to find if we can make a more interesting unit test. So let's go for a runtime test instead of a unit test, so we can see what happens at runtime. So we're going to go for we're going to be changing the override target prop so that we can use the net7 target, so we can open the Skia target. So here we're going to be net7 for Skia, and it's going to be selecting the solution filter for Skia here. So what we're going to be creating is, so two tests. The first one is going to be, I have a XAML file that has a list view and an item template, and when I want to determine why the items inside, I do have the wrong item template. And then the second one is for items control, why I don't have the templated parent set at all. So let's go in the runtime test for list view. So I have list view pages here. I have a given list view base somewhere. There you go. So that one starts to be pretty large, but I don't think we have anything with templated parent. No, we don't have any templated parent. We have template root here that is a little bit different, but it's not the one that we're looking for. So let's go create a new test. So our test is going to be when templated parent in a related source. In item. And then we're going to be creating our list view. I'm not too sure if we actually need to make that one complicated with a piece of XAML. But let's make it completely with some XAML here, so we can actually take the complete code that was available from the other from the sample that was provided. So our sample is going to be called this. Okay. Let's rename a bit inside so we have the right names. And we're going to be copy pasting the code that we had for the sample in here. And with the data that was behind. So small data context with 2 items. That will just do. Okay. So there we have it. Now we can create that specific item that we can put to the window content. and we're going to try to figure out what's inside. So we're going to be naming our elements in there so that we can assert the values. We call plain binding. Then that one's going to be content binding. That one is going to be templated parent binding. And the last one is going to be for the workaround, which is supposed to be working as well. That's going to be a element name binding. And that is not useful at all. Okay, so when we have loaded everything, we need to get the container from the first item. And we're going to try to get the contents of that item to figure out what's inside. So I have so SUT is not a container, so we have to name our container here. So this view, is going to be LV1. I'm going to change the fill modifier so we can actually see the number from our tests. And it's going to be LV1 container from index, and then this one is going to be LV0, and we can do from name, find name, and then we're going to find all the items that we have here. So let's go find plain binding first. We're going to do it for the others. We get content binding. We get templated parent binding. And then finally element name binding. And those should all have the same value. Well, except maybe for the for that one in the middle. Because that one is supposed to be mapping directly on the ListView item. So if we get to that point, we're going to get if we get the right value, we should be getting the ListView item and not the ListView itself, which is what we had and is not working properly. So we're going to be on the SUT and get a container from the index. So we got the ListView one here. And we need to be in the async method. There we go. And we're supposed to be getting text boxes, text blocks, I'm sorry. Text blocks. I'm going to be getting text blocks for everything. And for plain binding, we should be getting just the first item from the list, which is test1. That's one, and plain binding.text supposed to be this. And we're going to try for the rest. So for the content binding, we expect it to be the content binding, so on the stack panel. Actually, the binding of content of the item template. Sorry, so that would be the right content. So it's supposed to be exactly the same thing as the previous one. So it's supposed to be test1. For the template parent binding, the text supposed to be the full name of the ListView item, I would say. ListView item for a full name, maybe. And for the element name binding, we're supposed to be getting test1 as well. So there we are. We can start the app and go execute that specific test and see what we get. Okay, so we have a warning about my global JSON version. Probably should be installing the right version from the beginning, but so go for latest major, and we can use the pre-release as well. That should be working. properly. Let's see if that works. I'm not too sure because changing global JSON while the solution's opened, not necessarily a good idea, but let's see if it works. So in the last builds of Visual Studio Preview, they added those messages. Assembly loaded during task run. And for some reason, I mean, this was supposed to be hidden behind a parameter that is in SDK style projects and options. And it's supposed to be logged when logging level is not none. And in that case, it's none, and it's still showing up. So it looks like there's something that was changed. I hope that is going to be removed because it's quite verbose. But yeah, let's hope it's going to be for next week. Okay, so we have our skill build. So I wonder what could be causing this, because it means that for this view item container, we're manipulating the template parent explicitly for some reason, and it looks like it's not working properly. So that would be in list view item, I would guess, or maybe content control. So we have list view item here. So list view item is based on selector item. And I don't think we're manipulating template parent here, unless I'm mistaken. Yeah, we're not. Good. But in content control, we are. So not that version of the content control. That would be this one. And a templated parent. Nope. Okay, it's not modified here either. So it may be then a content presenter issue. That could very well be. So if we go in content presenter, templated parent. Oh, okay. So we have a synchronized with outer content with synchronized content with outer templated parent. So that is one feature that is related to this. We have also untemplated parent change for the content presenter. There's also one that's going down to nothing, I would guess. Yeah, that one's not doing anything. And we have also a method that's called synchronized content template parent, and content templated parent. And that one is probably doing something that we don't want. But I'm not too sure exactly what that is. So we're going to try to find out, we're going to put a breakpoint there and see if we're getting into one of those methods where the templated parent is set to something that is incorrect. Maybe something else, but it looks like a good candidate here. So by the looks of it, changing the global JSON has worked. That's unexpected, because sometimes it breaks. It actually breaks more when you're working with workloads. So workloads there are installed properly, so it looks like it's working. But in some cases, when the workloads are not installed properly, or let's say you have not installed the workloads and then you're running Uno check or you're running .NET workloads restore, then at that point you may want to restore Visual Studio, otherwise, or at least close your solution and start it again. Otherwise, you may have cached information that will not work. The .NET team has been adding a new feature that's called .NET Workload Clean. That is supposed to be cleaning everything with regards to workloads. So if you have workloads installed or anything like that, it's supposed to be removing everything. But last time I tried, it actually didn't work because it was trying to install more workloads than it was cleaning. So that was interesting. So have you did any of you try .NET 8 or not? Because it's preview, but yeah. Error. So do I have an error there? Okay, I do have an error with the compiler because the remote host is not trying to get, you have 25. Yeah, that's a lot of SDKs for sure. So it looks like the global JSON is not the right one. The life of previews. So let me not allow for pre-releases. That should be enough. So let's see what we get. And if it builds properly. It will probably take a bit more time to build again, but let's say if it's better than if it actually builds. Yeah, I don't know how many SDKs I do have installed, but I know it's actually quite a few. Let me take a look. Just SDKs. Oh, I don't have that. I don't have that much. It's probably on the other machines that I do have that that has quite a bit more of those. But so what I changed is that I wanted it to use the latest major that it can find, and it looks like it was using the latest patch, which is not working. So it was I think we're requesting for 70100, which is not installed on my machine. So it's probably going to be looking for the 70300 version, which is good enough. Unable to copy font split. So that one is something that we had last time. I don't remember exactly what had happened, but I'm just going to be, it's probably because we're not on the latest builds of Uno. So I'm just going to be removing the Fluent fonts for now. I think it's because I'm not using latest sources there. Looks like we have a race condition somewhere that prevents the files to be copied from one location to the other. And yeah, that's causing trouble here for building the whole solution. Okay. So if you have, so what it's building, if any of you have ChatGPT Plus, do you have access to better features like the plugins and others? I wonder. I'm trying to crowdsource some of my information. It's supposed to have been available for everyone using ChatGPT Plus, but it's not. I don't have it. I want to be able to play with it. So do any of you have that? Okay, so I have the build working here. So that's good. Oh, it's running on GTK. Well, that's fine. That works as well. Yeah, it looks like the GitHub Copilot chat has been open to everyone. That's nice. Okay, so my test is my test is when templated parent relative source. Is it broken somewhere? Looks like it's stopped. Let's see. Where's the Oh, okay. It looks like it actually tried to do some hot reload of some kind and it failed to build. Not too sure why. Let's try again. Yeah, Copilot and Writer. Yeah, that yeah. We'll see. Yeah, Copilot chat is interesting. Quite a the interesting part is the fact that it knows about the context. So yeah, it's very nice. Okay, so if I click that button again, it looks like something's broken. Let's try Windows. Looks like I broke something there. Not supposed to happen, but who knows? Okay, so it's just the WSL version that's breaking for some reason. Interesting. So we're going to be, if we have the time, we're going to take a look. Okay, so if I run the test, what do I get to? So I have my list view item. That's a list view item, which is fine. We have a plain binding text block, for which the value is test1. That's okay. Oh, I forgot to change the other ones. So we can try again. So we have template binding here. We have element binding here. Let's try again. It should build a lot, a little bit faster now. Now we're just rebuilding the runtime test. The runtime test head and binaries. Okay. So if I go directly to the content binding, I have a content binding for which the relative source binding failed. So we can reproduce the fact that it's not working properly. So that's good. Now, let's go try to find out if the content presenter, behavior that's synchronized content template parent is actually doing or not the right thing. Okay, so we have our content, we set the content, and then we get to synchronize content templated parent. So what's our content here? So we have our templated parent, which is a content control. Not sure which one that is. The content template root is empty. So in here for now, we don't have anything. Okay, so next is, okay, so the content template root here, and we're probably in the content presenter for the page. That would be the one, because if we take a look at the content, that's the page content. So that's expected that we have that content. Okay. So next is scroll content presenter. So that would be for the list. And so this goes scroll viewer that's inside the list, which is fine. Still, again, the content presenter, scroll content presenter. Then we have a content presenter again, for which the root of the template is a stack panel. Okay, so that would probably point to the new items that we created, which is this one. If we take a look at the name of that root element, we may see if it's the one that we're looking for. Correct. Okay, so in here, we can find that the current templated parent is the list view item, which is what we expect. But it may be that we are trying to find an actual templated parent and we're not finding the right one. And we can see here that we're trying to find the templated parent here, and we had the right one originally, and we changed it to something else. And that's not correct. So we're going to try to find out why we're trying to do, why we're trying to change that to another template parent. So I don't know why we didn't jump into, oh, that's a local one. Okay. So we're trying to find if it's an implicit text block. It's not that. We synchronize the templated parent. Okay. But for this one, we're trying to pick the outer templated parent. So we're picking up the templated parent. That's a long one, but yeah, that's where the problem is. And I'm not sure if we can fix this properly, because, doing it that way, we probably should be fixing the templated parent system completely. Having, setting the templated parent at the right place at the right time, particularly because we know when we're parsing the file, so that is something that we may try to fix here, but that would be something quite interesting, because we know that we're currently in the right templated parent, But maybe we should be evaluating if we need a separate templated parent in that context, because we're already in a control that is templating itself. That is a tricky one. So we do know that the workaround works, which is nice. What we don't know is if we can fix that properly. And I don't know if we can find a way to get around that. So we can know that, so there's that property though that's being set, and that is synchronize outer content with outer templated parent. So maybe there's a way to prevent that from happening. And there's only Combo Box that does that. But maybe list view should be doing this as well. Because the templated parent in that context is never right. So let's try it out and see what happens. So if we go to, let's say, items control, I'm going to try to find if we can change that in items control. In items control, and if we go into the prepare container for item override, we're setting things already with quite a few pieces. But let's try it here. So if we know that we're in a content control, so we may not be able to do it easily that way because we can't set it from the outside. That may be a bit tricky, because the property we're trying to set is set on it's set on the content presenter, and here we only have a content control, so we would need to poke through and find the first element. It's not an easy one. Okay, well, that was interesting. So we know that we can change. We know that we'll need to change some of that for this view, and try to poke at the contents of the contents of the content control that we're providing as part of the list view items. But it's not a small fix, and it's past the hour now, so I think we're going to take a look at that next week. And I hope you liked the demo about the Jiterpreter. It's super exciting feature that we're going to be able to test very soon. And until next week, happy coding, and bye for now.